I managed to retire early a couple years ago at the age of 53, and I truly felt blessed because I wonder what is so special about me that makes me warrant that I can retire early when so many people have to push on. What makes me so special? What makes me so unique? Well, really very little. But there is an ugly side to early retirement. It's not all just flowers and roses and spending time with the grandkids and living your best life. There are some ugly sides. Yeah, some of which, of course, is do I have enough money to move on and continue on in retirement? Or, I was a manager and now I'm just a husband or a father. And those are some realities that a lot of people deal with, some ugly truths that a lot of people just don't take into account. But one major one that I want to talk about is guilt. So many people now that retire early have this massive feeling of guilt. While so many others are working to 65, 67, 70, those that are able to retire early now have quite often this overwhelming sense of guilt. Well, let's talk about that. Welcome back to the hustle, everybody, and welcome back to the grind. And so glad to have you back. And thanks so much. Robert Winston actually dropped me a super thanks. Thanks so much, Robert. I really appreciate it. Today's coffee's on you. It is a chilly one, and this coffee's going down really well. Why? Well, it's only set plus 6 degrees this morning. With the high humidity, it's actually, they say it feels like plus 3. It's brisk. Yes, I've got the shorts on, but I'm ready for action. I've got my hot coffee, and we're good. And thanks so much, everybody. Thanks, Robert. But I also did receive a note from a gentleman by the name of Kevin. Kevin is just a fresh retiree at 52 years of age. Now, Kevin has a wife who's 53, who's wrapping up her career because they also have a son who's on the verge of wrapping up a college degree or finishing up in college. And so once that happens, then everybody's cutting loose and moving away from their corporate work or their jobs, if it will. Now, Kevin had dropped me this line, and I really appreciate. Thanks, Kevin. I want to send a shout out there, but it's definitely a feeling that a lot of people get of guilt. You wonder, a lot of people aren't able to retire early. When we see the government's constantly pushing back these benefits numbers, 65, it's going up to 67, Australia. We know some of the viewers here, are from Australia, and that's a factor that quite often is playing into it. 70 is another number that some of these countries are looking at. And so nobody's shortening that up. They're all pushing these dates back. And with people that haven't, been able to save or been able to even have a 401k built up or have to have one of those business or one of those jobs, say public sector that offers up a defined benefits pension, a lot of people strictly are relying on things like Social Security and a little bit of minor savings. And we know the times are tough. And this is the special reality that we're seeing today, that a lot of people just don't have the money that even they did 10 years ago. The dollars don't stretch and people are struggling to make ends meet. And there's a lot going on. There's a lot of external pressures that we all see and a lot of people sadly are dealing with. And it's much, much worse for sure. I hear stories, single fathers, single mothers trying to raise kids, and they're making a moderate salary and they're barely making ends meet, and they're having to cut back even on their own things, their own extras. And kids aren't doing sports. Kids are in old clothes. Sometimes the food's not on the table. And there's a lot of those stories that are just absolutely tragic and so sad. And honestly, this whole, when you think about what's going on around us, it's pretty easy to understand why, a lot of times people get frustrated, and it's very, very difficult to move on and, know that an early retirement is something that not everybody's going to enjoy. Not everybody's even going to have retirement at all. We know that there's a lot of talk of, I get viewers that often say that they're just going to die in front of their desk. This is just a reality. This is life as we know it today. Some will reach it, some won't, and everything in between. But see, every story is a little bit different. And Kevin's story is coming from a place of, he's trying to transition and get into, a little bit more fitness, going to work out and sort of retracting from the job. And in the meantime, you have people dropping comments like must be nice and the rolling of the eyes. And a lot of those comments, I've experienced those too. I've often, walked up to groups, go meet up with some family or a small group of friends, and they say, "What are you doing?" "Oh, I'm retired." And then you get this weird look. You get this strange look of questions and, some interest, but largely why? You can't get a job? And so it does create this sense of guilt easily. There's this sense of guilt that settles in. And what did I do so right? What makes me so special that I'm able to retire early and a lot of people can't? Well, there is a reality as well. And some of that is, regardless of the position that we find ourselves in, and I'm not a billionaire, Kevin, I presume you're not, and most of us are not. Most of us are, probably part of that 97 percentile that are basically grinders. We go out there, we go to school, we get a bit of a career, set off and make a life for ourselves. So the vast majority of us sort of set our trajectory in motion by the time we're in our 20s and 30s. Now, a lot of people have a lot of that advantage, and I've seen that privilege, if you will. See, because a lot of people then start to add in those comments. Oh, you must be so privileged, or, superiority complex kicking in. See, those are comments that you're now living with sometimes when you're in the wrong circles. Now, you're always going to have those discussions, but I like to think of other terms like prosperous and slightly successful. Now, that being said, that implies that, we've done something specific, and in some cases we have, in some cases it's a little bit of luck. I do consider the fact that I was able to retire a little bit early was a little bit of circumstantial, a little bit of luck, and a little bit of work along the way, but not everybody does that. Some people work way harder than I do. Some people are smarter than me. Many people are smarter than me and certainly do things better than I do that still aren't able to retire early. So what makes that so special? And understand the idea of guilt. It sets in and it's real because we know we're not perfect, but a lot of circumstances have been set in motion that allows us to do this. Again, sometimes it's luck, sometimes it's not. But what I look at, like, when I think about this, Kevin, and I want to address this to Kevin specifically as well, but all of the viewers out there that are wondering, contemplating, early retirement and the idea of guilt, or should I be doing that? Because I've heard of other people as well reach out, not just Kevin, but even in the comment section that said that they kind of felt guilty about retiring. Even one viewer, I think they were at 65 years of age and they felt guilty about leaving. So there's always that sense of guilt. And it doesn't matter whether you're retiring early, whether you're retiring on time, whether you're even retiring late. There's that sense of, this is the last time I'm walking out these doors. This is the last time I'm going to see these coworkers. This is the last time I'm going to close this laptop. See, this is the last time for all of this. And there's a sense of not knowing, unsure, a little bit of sense of minor panic, but certainly there's a little bit of guilt in there. Shouldn't I be doing more? We all grow up and we're sort of indoctrinated of the principles that we should be contributing, we should be productive. But when you retire, you don't have to be productive like that. And that's one thing that I've learned along the way is I'm still productive and it makes me feel good to be productive, but I do it now in my own ways. Instead of making a corporation a ton of money, which I don't know if I was always the person doing that, if we're being honest, I probably lost them some money along the way. But the idea of being productive my own way, painting a fence or building something or building a bookshelf or cleaning the house or the shed, that's productive in my own way and something that still has to get done. So that's how I get past the guilt of finding that lack of productivity or leaving the job and that level of productivity that you always provided. But there's always those passive aggressive comments, Kevin, and everyone else here. Those passive aggressive comments that, when people are rolling the eyes and people are making those snarky comments, what you got to remember, here's the way I see this. Passive aggressive and some of those microaggressions happen even when you're working. Have you not been in a meeting at some point and you've got people, you're making a comment, there's a meeting and everybody's kind of giving consensus or giving their point of view and chatting and offering up their ideas. And all of a sudden, lo and behold, you say something, might be a little bit half-cocked, might be a little bit out there, or maybe something that's kind of, out there from the rest of the group's ideas. Then you get this weird look, this pause, this awkward silence, and sometimes these rolling of eyes and then that whispering of those people over there, those other peers of yours that are over there, you can tell are saying something. It's all those microaggressions that happen. And it doesn't matter if you're early retired. It doesn't matter if you're working. People are people, and that seems to be a human nature. Microaggressions, comments that just don't seem very in good taste. And that's just something that we all will always live with. And the way I see this I truly do feel blessed. And Kevin, I can tell that you are totally grounded and you're in the same book as I am, that we just feel blessed by this. We don't feel like, you know, we're any necessarily more deserving. We just feel like, you know, we've played our cards right, we've done some things, and we've had some luck in our side. And now we're in a position where, you know what, looked at the numbers, I think we're okay, we can make this happen. And see, by doing that now, you're now in a position where you're able to move on, but now you're having this sense of guilt because maybe some of your peers and your friends aren't in the same boat. The way I look at this was, as I worked and treaded my way through life, and I've talked about this in many other videos, the only way I was able to make early retirement work was sacrifice. Because a lot of people work hard like I do or harder. So it's not a matter of how hard you work. And if I like to look at this almost like the wealthy barber. Anybody ever hear of the wealthy barber? Well, the wealthy barber is really more on the premise of a penny saved is a penny earned. And so I spent the vast amount of my life sacrificing in other ways. And a lot of people do. So this is not unique. And I definitely have to put that out there. There are people that sacrifice. There's people that do without even by force, or they just can't. And they still are not in that position. And there's all kinds of other circumstances. There's different levels at which, you know, everybody has their levels of affordability and how they can, you know, achieve their own level of personal success. But for me, it could have been all the difference with buying 2 or 3 new cars throughout my life. You know, if I bought a new truck every 4 or 5 or 6 years, that would have put me over the edge and I probably wouldn't have been able to retire early. The fact that I don't waste a lot of money on, you know, low quality goods. You know, I don't spend a lot of money. I don't buy a lot of products off Amazon. I don't buy a lot of junk from the dollar store. And I'm not saying that's the end all be all, but you know, what I did learn early on was the art of investment, not in a good way. I'm not an investor and I'm certainly not a financial advisor. But all I know is a penny saved is a penny earned. And I lived by that premise so many years. And so by living that way and by being frugal and not spending on new vehicles every few years, that actually compounds. Because earlier in your life, when you start making money, you get excited, overzealous, and you start spending money on toys because you realize I have an extra $800 a month I can throw at a vehicle. So you get into that routine, and then this goes on, and these, you know, that marketing machine is a son of a, you know, they get people dialed in and they get people trading up and giving you incentives and motivation, and people keep buying and buying and buying. Next thing you know, all that expendable money is gone on a new car. But I've never done that. I've always driven junk. I mean, I had a couple nice cars along the way, but usually that was a little extra savings I put on the side. But I always had making sure I plugged in money in investments and savings and earnings. I always focus on my house. I really tried to stay away from bad habits like gambling and smoking and drinking. And that's something, quite often, there's sacrifices. There's sacrifices along the way that are going to create situations in the future sometimes. But it is tough, I know, because a lot of people make sacrifices and a lot of people still will never be able to retire. That's always, sadly, going to be a thing. Now, Kevin, how he copes, it sounds like basically just avoiding the conversation or just kind of saying, you know, we're working remotely or working from home. And that's, you know, that's kind of where things get to some point because, you know, for me, I look at this, it is a badge of honor, fortunately, to be able to retire early because it sort of showcases your efforts, but it showcases a little bit of the luck. It showcases all of the factors that led you down that path. Again, not a lot of people do the same, put in the same effort, but the point is, I think playing that right. Guilt is always going to be there to some degree, and I have guilt. I had guilt as well. I look around and, you know, I see these people hustling and grinding and heading off to their jobs, and that's what this channel really is about. It's not, this is the last thing I want to do is rub anything in anybody, because I truly believe through getting yourself fired up, through, you know, my motivation, hopefully, through these conversations, through the very idea that you're now prioritizing your life, your health, your well-being, your family. That's the priority. You see, it's not about being lucky or having money. It's not about being affluent. It's not being rich or being poor. It's none of that, because it's a priority shift. It's a mind shift for me. And for me, it was like, I knew I was going to retire in my mid to late 50s. This company just fast-tracked it for me. But the thing is, all along, I knew earlier on in my career when I was away from home for extended periods of time that I missed my family. I missed my spouse, my kids. I missed them all dearly. And when I missed them like that, I really had this sort of tidal shift and this thought process that kind of went from making a pile of money to I can't buy time back. And realizing now that it doesn't matter how much money you have at the end of the road, when there's no time left, if you've got $30 million in the bank, what good is it to you? I know somebody personally who was worth hundreds of millions of dollars. He was buying new exotics every year. He had the money, he was traveling, he had multiple homes and beautiful exotic locations. But his health shifted very quickly and for the much worse. And I know when that time comes, you look back and think, I would trade all of this money for my time. I need that time. I'd love to spend time doing a few more things I like to do. I'd like to spend more time with my friends and family. I'd like to spend more time in my hobbies. I'd like to spend more time just to smell the roses. I'd like to spend more time to go for a nice little leisurely walk on a brisk fall day. These are times and time in our lives that we just can't get back. So regardless of, if you have enough or if you don't have enough, or we feel I'm ready for retirement or I'm not ready for retirement, my takeaways from Kevin is he's prioritizing his health. And from this note, he reached out, getting more into fitness, bicycling and hitting the gym and doing those things, looking after his health and staying totally focused on trying to elongate and extend his health to a point where he can enjoy it with his spouse and his child. So this is something that becomes more of a priority shift rather than being lucky, or rather than even the investment strategies, because investment strategies are one thing, and I know we can't live off, cotton balls and leaves. We all need money to some degree, but prioritizing that quite often is a lot easier than you think. Maybe you got to downsize your house. Maybe you buy an older car. You know what? There's always a way. And the way I see this, prioritizing, unless you're a billionaire, which I'm not, and I don't believe Kevin is, unless you're a billionaire, we're all just having to make concessions along the way to reprioritize to make it happen. Maybe we forego that big house. Maybe we don't do the renovations. The hell with it. Sell the house as is, downsize and buy that small condo. Whatever it is, it's a shift in priorities. And because some of us are making those plans to retire early, it's clear that the focus now has shifted from pounding out making money to a place where, money doesn't matter so much. I'm valuing my time more, my family, my hobbies. And so the sense of guilt, I totally understand it. It is sort of that ugly side of early retirement. A lot of people do feel guilty because they see all these people grinding, heading to their jobs. Look at this, one after another, where they're going. All these people in a hurry to go somewhere. But to what? That pointless job where they're sitting in a mindless meeting. And we all have to earn a living. At some level, though, at some point, the decision for people that decide to early retire usually comes from a place of, you know what, I've seen the other side. I had sick family members. I realized that chasing the dollar isn't the answer to all my happiness. It's time to get out and get while the getting's good. So thanks so much, Kevin, for reaching out. It is a sense that I understand the guilt. You're always going to have human nature, and people are always going to sort of look at you with that look. But let's put it this way. At the end of the day, The people that are happy for you, the people that are giving you the thumbs up and the green light and saying congrats, are probably more likely the people you want in your life. And if anything, this showcases further the people that you don't need in your life. Those people that are rolling their eyes or, oh, must be nice. You don't want them in your life anyway. Those are the people you think of, thank you. You sent me a message. You taught me a little message about life, about you. And now this tells you everything you need to know about that person. See, because if people aren't happy for you, it doesn't matter if you're working there with them or you're retiring early. Chances are they're not happy for you. You show up on a Monday morning with a new car, they're now talking all kinds of smack about you. So at the end of the day, some people will never be happy. And quite honestly, those that aren't happy for you when you decide to retire early, you probably don't want them in your life. And count this as a blessing that these people actually expose themselves for what they are. Somebody that doesn't have your best interest in mind, because retiring early just isn't about money or wealth. It's not about affluence. It's not about, having all that cash in the bank. It's about strictly having that priority to say, I value my life. My time is limited, and I'd much rather spend it with my wife and my kids than spend it with these pointless puppets that I see in this corporation. Anyway, please do drop a line, everybody. Thanks again so much, Robert, for the coffee. It's really going down well. And thanks, Kevin, for reaching out. Don't feel guilty. You've earned it. You've done your piece. Now it's time to enjoy. Hope to see each and every one here real soon, everybody. Bye-bye.